Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Localization Fireside Chat channel. Today, honored to have with me as a guest, Suki Alberga. And Suki and I, we know each other now for a while. We've known each other for a while. I had the honor of meeting Suki face-to-face for the first time in Moncton, New Brunswick. This winter, I guess I was there a couple months ago now. And incredible person, incredible achievement. And today's topic, we will be talking about the diversity and equality and the interconnectivity, if you will, between the topic of diversity and equality and localization, which affords the opportunity for communication in any language on any subject. So again, honored to have with me Suki. I'd love to, this conversation is going to be very exciting. And the topic of diversity and equality, it's always needs to be in front of us, because there's a lot of subjects around the topic that we can probably enhance, improve from a humanity perspective to do better. And this is what this topic is all about. How can we work together in various industries to make sure that we are advancing diversity and equality across various demographics and geolocations? So welcome to the show, Suki. And I'll give you the mic. Just do a little bit, if you don't mind. Give us a little bit of an intro, who you are, where you are, and what's your personal and business interests.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I know we always have fun when we get together, so hopefully listeners will enjoy this conversation as well. So I'm Suki Alberga. I'm the founder of Bridging Legal Solutions. We're the first multidiscipline practice in Canada in the area of business law and health law. We do services for HR and accounting. So really, truly, when clients come to us, and the reason I came up with the whole idea and the concept of the firm was that when clients do come to us, especially if they're in the startup space or health practitioners, that we are able to help them not only from one legal issue, but from every angle that overlaps, right? And sometimes it can be a CRA issue or an HR issue. So I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship. It's in my veins. My family are entrepreneurs. Prior to being a lawyer, I had with previous profession in corporate and health law sector. So for me, I used to find clients would say to me, Suki, when you give us advice, you just don't give us legal advice. You kind of you give us this broad understanding of things that we didn't even consider or think about. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I came up with a multidiscipline practice. It was quite the feat to convince the law societies to finally get the permits and stuff. So we're operating both in Ontario and New Brunswick. And so it's exciting. It's an exciting venture that we're going through. And topics like these are really important because we are in the type of clients and the space that I'm in. We have a lot of technology, individuals coming with new innovation and things like that. So these kind of things, diversity, biases, inclusion, overlap, and it's so important. And how we do business and how we hire individuals, and what is that supposed to look like, and how can we be stronger together going into the future, and really breaking ground in many areas. And I think inclusivity and diversity is a key part of that. And also merit. Merit is so important too.
And it's it's one of those podcasts that I've started where we actually have a bit of a more casual tone in terms of how we talk on this podcast. We target several areas. And I know you were living in Ontario, right? So, and you moved to Moncton, New Brunswick. And me being from Moncton originally, I found that very interesting. Somebody from Toronto to move to Moncton. Just a side note, if you don't mind, for the audience, what drove you to move to Moncton?
Well, actually, I think the real reason we ended up moving, and quite frankly speaking, we were one of the rare breeds that actually moved I think it was 8-9 months before the pandemic actually hit. So we weren't that wave afterwards. We were the wave before.
It was not during the pandemic. It was
no. And I think I have twins, and they're 6-year-olds. And so for me, it was really important for them to have a sense of community growing up. And I remember when I grew up on the Danforth, a little big town. And I just remember you'd be playing outside as a kid and your parents wouldn't worry where you are. You'd
No.
end up having dinner at your neighbors and your parents would know that. And then all of a sudden you would get that 9 o'clock call when the sun's coming down in the summer to come home, right? And, you know, like people were just looking out for each other. There was the neighborhood watch. I remember that, right? And we kind of just felt that, you know, I wanted that sense of community. And it was like, where could we do that? And where is a new place to kind of, that's going to have more growth. I love Toronto. I mean, I'm born and raised there, you know, and it's a beautiful city and everything else. But, you know, it's saturated now. And so the sense of community meant that you had to go really out in the suburbs. And we lived in King City for a little bit there as well. But then again, it was really hard to get that sense of community. So we kind of bite the bullet and thought we'd come here because Moncton is kind of known for its being friendly and a real sense of community.
Absolutely.
And so I have no regrets. I actually really love it here and my children are thriving. And so it was a good decision for us, by all means. It really was.
For our audience, for those of you who don't know, I started my career journey in Moncton. And and this is where I started my localization career journey in Moncton. And our small office was in Dieppe, New Brunswick, actually, just the opposite side of the river, and that separates the two. That little what do you call it? Petitcodiac River.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, and it's sort of like my hometown. Every time I go back to Moncton, it's like going home, and I miss it. And I hope one day I'll be able to you know, retire in that area. Just like something part of me, I guess.
Oh, I would love that. We have coffee every week, you and I. And you know what the great part is that and I say sometimes my friends, I think they envy me sometimes. I'll say to them, oh yeah, we just came, you know, we were at the ocean, you know, and we just came back and it's like a 15-20 minute drive. Whereas in you got to go to Lake Simcoe or Collingwood, you know what I mean?
That's not an ocean, that's a lake.
Yeah. And really, it's just a short distance drive away. And it had to take a lot of getting used to being in Moncton because when I first got here, I always had that, you know, oh my goodness, how long is it going to take to go find the hospital? Or how long is it going to take to go drive over to the government building? Meanwhile, they're like 10 minutes apart. And you're thinking to yourself, I don't miss the 401. I do not miss the 401.
Oh, you did such a wonderful thing by not missing the 401.
Yeah. I hear like any time of the day, it's busy there now.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And traffic is getting crazy here because lots of accidents on the highway and they block the highway, as you know, and that causes a whole bunch of headache to people. Yeah. Switching back to our main topic, if you don't mind, in your own words, what do you mean? Can you tell me a little bit about equality in your, you know, from your own perspective? What does that mean to you?
I think equality for me means is everyone having the opportunity, you know, having the opportunity. If you have the skill set, you have the gifts and talents, an opportunity should be afforded to you. And it just should be there. It's like a given thing. And I think
regardless of gender, ethnicity, regardless of backgrounds.
Yeah, no, not at all. Like, I think it's really, what do you bring at the table? What do you bring at the table? And I think we have to sort of be careful a little bit about that. In my humble opinion, I feel that sometimes if we do, there has to be a balance. Don't get me wrong. Diversity, being a minority woman myself, and I mean, I had a father who, you know, his story was, I came here in 1963 with $8 in my pocket, and I saw discrimination, and I felt it, but I still made something out of myself. And honestly, my father has Jewish friends, Italian friends, like Greek friends, like, you know, he's an Indian man. He has his, you know, friends of his own as well. Like, he was never like that. And I think I get a lot of that from my parents too. My parents, when they came here, they were really open. They weren't like, you know, we're going to be in our own segregated thing. Not that I'm saying that's bad. I'm not saying that that's the wrong thing. But what I'm saying is that there was always like a recognizing of the other person's diversity and culture and respect for that, and finding commonality in that, and really embracing each other. And I think that's really important, because when we do that, it's so enriching, the relationships become. And then we get people who come with like different talents that have a lot to bring to the table. And when they do that, we can advance in society in so many wonderful ways, you know? And I think, I don't know, I don't mean to sound like an utopia or kind of way of thinking, but I'm being realistic in the sense that that's not attainable or whatever thing. But what I'm saying is the opportunity should be afforded, and it should be based on what you bring, you know, your education, your gifting, your talents. Individuals should be valued for that. And I think organizations and companies, when they see that with talent acquisitions, and it is becoming more and more competitive, right, to get that great talent. And nowadays, what, you know, the average employee wanted back like 20, 30 years ago isn't the same. I think that I'm kind of in the middle. Like I know a lot about the old generation. I'm kind of in the middle generation, and I can understand the younger generation as well, right? Where they're saying, well, we want to do it differently from how you did it and your parents did it, you know? Whereas our parents were the ones that kind of broke ground, you know, tried to get those doors open for us. And then it was up to us to walk into those doors with whatever talents and gifts we had and do an impact and say, yes, I can sit at the table, right?
Yeah,
it was being able to, be able to sit at the table. Our parents opened the door, we got to sit at the table, but now the younger generation definitely need to be not only sit at the table, but now you have to have a voice, and that voice should be based on what you bring at the table and the value. I think, you know what, sometimes I've experienced too, individuals will sometimes, and I've noticed this too, like when it's always best to be like not to be the so smartest person at the table. I think it's such a valuable thing to do, you know, and if you are, don't need to tell anybody that you are. Just sit and absorb, right? And hear what's being
be that stealth person.
yeah, exactly, right? And hear what's being said, and then contribute, you know, with you know, wisdom. I think wisdom is such an important thing to have nowadays, and people need to understand that, you know, to think things through and then be able to speak. But you know, when you're at a table when other people are smarter than you, right, and you're listening and you're respecting what they have to say, and then you speak something that they're like, oh my goodness, wow, I didn't like, oh, that took me back. That's really what, oh, that's interesting what you said. People take notice, and that's what's really valuable, because it's what's the change you can bring? What's the positive impact that you as an individual can bring? Doesn't matter what your gender is or what your color is or anything like that. And I think at the end of the day, it's so important we embrace each other. We embrace the differences
and uplift one another, because you know, a lot of times, you know, people have the skills, and, you know, I mean, this is a topic that everybody is on their mind right now in Canada and in the Western world, is that we have a lot of newcomers coming in with good degrees. They were practicing, you know, high level career and professions in their home countries, but they come here and they end up, you know, driving a taxi or doing something menial, not in their profession, that's for sure. And so the uplifting part is very, very important. Give people a chance to demonstrate their skills.
Yeah, and I think, you know, sometimes people talk about, well, you know, there's certain privileges afforded to certain individuals and demographics of people, right, so to speak. And I think maybe in the past that was true, because if you think about it, and I can, you know, like I was in a conversation on diversity and inclusivity, and it was a webinar that was taking place in the States. And they were talking about how there was like a significant percentage of white families that are below the poverty line, right? And so I think sometimes when we kind of throw the word privilege out there, it's like, yeah, no doubt there was, at a time there was, and then maybe in some cases it can be. Obviously, I remember when I was in university and I was doing my undergrad there, I took a course on gender and what was it? Gender, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was just a course about, you know, society and how gender plays in it and things like that. And even in that course, I remember at the time, I was probably 19 years old. I had never thought about it. And it really opened me up to think, well, you know what? An experience that a white woman would have versus what a Black woman would have versus what a South Asian woman would have versus an Asian woman would have, or even in their male counterparts. They're going to be different experiences. There's going to be different challenges for them, right? So I think at the end of the day, it's a lot of just understanding each other's, you know, well, what you may call them plights, you may call them difficulties, understanding them and having compassion for one another, but saying, you know what, I identify with, you know, what you went through, you know, and this is what I went through, but let's come together. How can we do better? You know, and coming together, I think there's power. There's more power in numbers than it is, you know, like you can achieve more, right? Like they say with the cord and the chain, like the more links you have on the chain that are strong and linked together, the stronger the bond is, and it's more unbreakable that way. And I really truly believe that. And I think a lot of businesses and companies can really establish that within their, you know, team environments and culture that they bring in their workplace.
Now, having your background as a lawyer, this one is a little more of a combination between your being a lawyer and you being an advocate for diversity and equality. Is what happened in what's your advice, I guess, to somebody who is a victim or have been subject to discriminatory remarks, for instance, that stems from biased behavior toward them? So what would you recommend and to the audience, and how would you think they should deal with a situation like this?
Yeah, unfortunately, in many ways, people will experience that in different degrees, I think. For myself, I have had myself as well. And
We all did, me too.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think, and I don't want to generalize anything because it's different degrees of it. But I think as Canadians, if we do, it happens in certain levels where there's a power imbalance, right? Be it possibly at a firm, be it possibly in the government sector, so to speak. You know, you're going to the municipality, you're trying to get a permit for something. You know what I mean? You never know, right?
Yeah.
Like there is, or you're trying to get promoted with an organization. Sometimes you may have an individual that may not truly understand. They may be senior. There's a power struggle there. Sometimes there's an unconscious bias that they may not even realize.
You know, you bring up a very good topic, that unconscious bias, and I'll let you finish your thoughts in a second. Because one of the episode that we recorded on this channel, it was with the president of the Women in Localization, Carrie Fisher, and we talk a lot about unconscious bias. Some people have, you know, the good mind and the good intentions, but sometimes things happen unconsciously, because that's how, unfortunately, things have been trending for many years in terms of the way they think, in terms of etc. But they have all the good intention. They don't mean to hurt anybody, but the unconscious bias plays a big role in sometimes what we do and what we think.
Yeah, I think it's a fine balance there. And I'll speak to that in a minute, but I'll answer your first question first, is that giving advice to someone who may have been on the receiving end of some form or some level of discrimination. I think at the end of the day, discrimination is as if your gut feeling makes you feel uncomfortable, you feel uncomfortable, or you feel that you were treated a certain way. You may likely have been on the receiving end of that. Right? Because nobody ever wants to feel in any different way. And I think some people will argue, oh, you know, some people are really sensitive, you know, and it's like, well, we have to respect everybody's feelings and their experiences, because everyone has a degree of challenges, right? So like, for example, like somebody might say, and maybe I'm going to get into a little bit of a topic here that might be controversial a little bit, but I mean good intentions when I say this, that someone who is a male white individual trying to get a job saying, you know what, now this diversity and equality thing is happening, and I feel like I'm not being treated with, you know, the opportunity for me, because there's this initiative that companies have, or a company has, and I feel like maybe I lost out on this interview or whatever, and they may feel that way. Whereas the other person saying, well, here I am, I'm a minority, but am I being really hired for my talents, or am I being hired because they just want to fill a quota?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, you're right.
What I'm saying?
And
So
it's
each
not,
person is valid in what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to empathize with each one, and you say, but you don't know. But I think at the end of the day, it's like when you're input in those situations, it's sort of saying to yourself,
Mhm.
okay, this person had, like, I mean, if it's really outright discrimination where they come out to you abusive, like really blunt about it, then I think everyone, no matter who it is, even if it's a power struggle, you have a right to speak up. You have a right to say, I'm sorry that you feel that way, or whatever the case may be. Don't engage in it, obviously, back. You do not want to do that. Keep your demeanor, your professionalism, and then you know what? You have the Human Rights Commission. That's what it's there for, right? And you
So
file.
your advice is to, if somebody is subject to this, to go to Human Rights Commission.
Absolutely.
And if they are in a work environment, I'm assuming that would be what, HR or something? Or?
That they should go to their HR department and make a complaint and speak to them about it. Of course, yes, it should go into management. Now, if it's the manager themselves doing it, right? Or in cases where we have, and I have clients that come to me because I do the HR end of it as well, is like, for example, I had an individual who has a disability, and she was hired. And within her disability, she also had another disability that she did not disclose to the employer. And her disability that she had, that she did not disclose to her employer, was just because she just didn't want to be treated differently. But however, that made her not as, she wasn't as a functioning adult in terms of social networking and social encounters with individuals and your teammates. So she always felt that they would always be like, you're too quiet. You need to open up more. You need, like, you know, there would be these kind of things. And she felt like they were jabs at her, you know, and really, but she was very talented in what she did. And then it got to the point where it was becoming very overt that they were mistreating her and treating her differently. And there was a grounds for discrimination on disability as well as race. And so then, yes, a human rights complaint was filed. And then, of course, when it goes to the human rights complaint tribunal, they will assess your complaint. They won't proceed to tribunal hearing until they actually assess the value. And so an adjudicator would look at that, make sure that there is merit, and then they will also make sure that a settlement can happen first before even going to hearing. Right. And then once you do file a complaint, you can't withdraw it, because the whole tribunal is there for a reason to ensure that this doesn't happen. Right. That, you know, Canadians have, no matter who we are, what background we have,
That's
that,
right.
you know, we don't tolerate discrimination here. Like, as a society, it's not something that's acceptable.
Yeah,
right?
this is something that Canada done very well, and I'm
Yes.
proud to say that
Yes.
as a Canadian,
Yes.
is that we've targeted this entire topic of discrimination very heavily, and I'm proud to say as a Canadian that we're making a huge progress on the topic. So, I mean, there are still areas of improvement, and there always will be, but we put the policies in place, we put the system in place to address discrimination, so, which is great. Now, if just on another topic, for instance, a lot of times these things do happen. I'm talking about infringement on somebody's, you know, background, etc. Those, you know, biases that happen against people, not because people sometimes intend to happen, but they are not educated well enough about the topic of, you know, biases and diversity and inclusion and all that stuff. In terms of education, like, for yourself, like, where did you find resources to study the topic, and what can you tell the audience if they're not familiar with the topic, and if they're not up to date? I would say they may be familiar from a high level, but if they want to get detailed, they want to dive into the topic of diversity and inclusion, where do they go to get information on the topic?
Well, there's plenty of
I mean,
resources.
Google is one of them, but
Yeah, right. Those are plenty of resources too. And for us, I think, which is really great is, and, really commend our profession that, the different law societies and the Canadian Bar Association does topics on this, and they bring in experts to come in and talk about it. So, I usually attend those. I read up on them. There's a lot of podcasts that you can look into. There's some leading speakers on it. There is a National Committee on Diversity and Equality. You can look them up and you can read about that more, and they can speak to that as well. I think self-education is also important. And I'd like to say a little bit about the unbiased as well. You're right. Sometimes unconscious bias, again, that's why it's called that. You're not consciously aware of it, that you're doing it, right? For example, when we say, oh, okay, there is a new female judge was appointed from a different background, right? All of a sudden, we're all like, that's really great, right? Like, oh my God, that's awesome. There's more inclusion, equality there. This is great. Well, at the same time, you think about it, when a white male judge is appointed on a merits of the accomplishments that they receive, are we really, celebrating that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's that balance and trying to realize, like,
it does sound a little bit like we're trying to uplift something by putting somebody else's down. It
yeah,
does.
and that's not right.
That's what I'm hearing, right?
That's not right.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, and I don't want to say
it's supposed to be like, water floats everybody up kind of thing. So
exactly, right? Yeah, let's celebrate that. Yeah, okay, doors are being opened, and there's more gender equality, race equality, all that kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
But I think we shouldn't sit there, I think we need to move beyond that. And yes, there's still some work to be done for us to get to moving beyond that. Trust me, I get that. And there I think more countries that have more of a struggle than others too of getting there and moving on beyond that. But I think Canada, we still have hope that we can do that. And when I say moving beyond that, is I'm saying we need to start looking at what the person brings, their merit. What do they bring? And that's valuable, because each and every one of us has gifts and talents, right? And when we come together and we learn from each other, right? That's where innovation takes place. That's where passions meet passion, and thought-provoking and moving the envelope, pushing society forward in a positive way, right? Like if we talk about, biases as well, let's talk about that a little bit, especially in technology now, right? AI was started by a couple of white gentlemen in Harvard who came up with an algorithm and the whole bit. But you know what? We have to be conscious of the fact that, and understand that they did it, I think it was in the 1970s, when they came up with this algorithm and everything. So they were only putting in what they knew, their own culture, their own understanding of society, where they saw it was going to go, what kind of vision that they had for it, right? But you know how things were in the 70s to how things are now, so much history happened, so many breakthroughs,
many changes,
happened, right? Civil rights movements, women's rights, like all sorts of different political stance came and issues were coming up, like all sorts of stuff changed. And the way the family structure was, 2-income households now, right? It's not just, the woman working, the male working and the woman's not working. Even our family law has to change a little bit with time. I mean, obviously it is, but some of our laws, like we have to look at, well, what does the family dynamic look like? That's different now, right? And of course, the workplace looks different now as well. And I think the other thing to consider too is that, yes, these gentlemen came up with all this algorithm, and there are innate biases in there. Governance is really important. That's where governance has to come in, where we sort of regulate that and really encourage tech companies to take the initiative, because look, at the end of the day, it's costly. It's costly to do these things and make sure whatever program or whatever coding or thing that you're coming up with, that is, because it has an existing system that you really have to tweak, right? It's costly to do that. And there is hallucinations and all these other issues that can still come up. So in order to rectify them or make it work in a certain way, and privacy and data security and all that, it takes a lot of manpower, labor. When I say manpower, you know what I mean, right? Right? Just like power. Yeah, that's right. Yes, right.
Power.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So so you need all that, and that's going to cost money. But a lot of companies aren't going to do that if they're not regulated to do it, right? So it's really important that we get governance over things like ChatGPT, AI in innovation and stuff, because I think in many ways it's a good thing, but it has to
remain ethical.
That's right, ethical and governed. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
you're very passionate about the topic. I'm so happy to have you on this podcast this morning. I can see the passion from you regarding this topic. You've done a lot of thinking about it. You've worked on it for many years, and it's very refreshing to see that, because most people, they either learn a topic and they're talking about it because it's part of what they do. If I have like a PhD person here talking about splitting atoms, they'll talk about it from a very dry scientific, but you inject a lot of your emotion into a topic, which I really like that. Because it's very important topic, and we need to be passionate about it. But obviously I love your approach, meaning balancing things out. I really like that. It doesn't mean that one demographic goes up, another demographic needs to go down. That's not the intention at all. I think it's more like high water raises everybody.
Yes, yeah.
And it's supposed to be that way. Now,
can I say something else, Robin? I think it's really important, because I remember like being on the side where I knew there was an underlying discrimination happening. Like I knew it. I absolutely knew it. But you know what? At the time, I also thought to myself, and yes, it was in a work environment kind of thing that it was, and it was power imbalance. At the time, I think I was an articling student. And so having said that, like it was, I just remember, thinking to myself, I have two options here, right? Like, do I say something about it, or do I take it, or do I focus on my goal? Like, what do I do and keep pushing through kind of thing? And I think in many ways, I did both. What I did was I kept pushing through. And then I remember I ended up at the end of it, approaching the person and really let them know how I felt. And quite frankly speaking, at the end of what my time in term with this individual working with them, that person's mindset shifted and actually said to me that I was one of their students at the end of the day. So I think what it is to say that, yes, it's not a nice thing to be on the receiving end. And I'm not certainly saying that everybody's individually different, but I think how you choose to handle it for yourself, that's going to suit you and your personality and who you are. Be brave enough to do it that way, what works for you, and if you feel like, no, this is something I need to complain, like, then do that. But I mean, everybody's going to uniquely handle things differently, right? There's no right or wrong answer. But I think one thing is consistent, that things like this don't advance society, don't move our country in a positive way, does not help our next generation in any way.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't advance our business world. The heart of our country is business, right? A lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses are really the backbone of this country as well, right? Yeah. So, again, we need to really make sure people have the opportunities. And I think the fact that we even give them a chance to have an opportunity, because in some countries you don't even get that.
Yeah.
And like I think about some of the women, in Muslim countries where they're not allowed to be educated, the Taliban and all the stuff that's going on there, and you think to yourself, my gosh, yes, we have issues here, right? Yes, there's still some improvement to be made. Yes, there's still some, glass ceilings to break through. but we still have a foundation that the
Still need to worry about the human family around the globe, basically.
Yes, that's
There are
right.
areas and there are pockets that are more disparate than others. And
And what we do here and the opportunity that we have to do something about here, the world is watching and we're inspiring them.
That's the example.
You know, because the little girl or the teenage girl that's been told by the Taliban that she cannot be educated is looking to North America and Europe and the world and seeing us women and everybody else and what we're doing, because one day they wish, they hope, and one day they will inspire to do that. And we got to keep them inspired, because I think that's what's helping them get through. So I think we have to be conscious. I think there's a lot of, not unconscious of, you know, discrimination, bias, and race and all that, and tolerance and things like that. I mean, even tolerance. That's a little funny word too. I want to talk about that for a minute too. But what I want to say is that we have to be careful of that. We need to be mindful of what we do in society and in our communities here, local communities, on a provincial level and a national level here in Canada, is really going to impact and inspire other people around the world too. I think if we can all stop and think about that too, I think we're going to keep continuing to make really good ground in this area. But yes, there's still work to be done. There's still work to be done.
Absolutely.
But in terms of saying the word tolerance, like it was always like, you know, tolerant. The word tolerance is just like, again, you know,
I mean, if I look at it in a dictionary, I'm tolerating somebody. I don't like it. I'm tolerating it.
There's a difference between tolerating
It's so
someone.
offensive to me.
Yeah, embracing someone, embracing and accepting, right? And welcoming, right? And learning and being open to new experiences and things like that. So yeah, I think when we're more that way, we actually do good things. We're able to do amazing things as a society.
Look, I mean, I know we're coming up on time here, but from our industry, from the localization industry, and how this whole thing fits, when we talk about diversity, inclusion, equality, those kinds of things, you know, there are some practices that goes into any company, any industry, that will either, you know, you have to put some metrics in place, you have to put some systems in place to, you know, encourage diversity and inclusion. But in the localization world, I think it's more native to us, because I feel like, I mean, take a company such as the company I work for, and, you know, if you translate, let's say, to, I don't know, 400 languages more per year, well, guess what? You're touching 400 different demographics. These individuals from those demographics, they need to do the actual work. So we're engaging in our industry these pockets of people, of populations, and we're bringing them in. It doesn't matter if their geolocation nowadays. The world is connected. It doesn't matter where they are. They could be in Africa. They could be in South America. They could be in Europe, Eastern Europe. It doesn't matter where they are in the globe. And we're bringing them in to be a productive member of society. Part of what this is, and also solving a problem, because once they contribute, then the whatever we're producing, content, etc., that's got to become accessible in that language as well. So I feel like the localization industry is, you know, could be used as an example of how, and of course, I mean, you know, the journey is not over. We still have tweaks and other things to do, but the basis of the industry is there to promote diversity and equality in every language and every demographics around the globe. Now,
I think the key there, if I could just say, Robin, if I may interject there for a moment, is when you guys are doing what you're doing, right? You're opening new ideas. You're making a sort of a network of people coming together, sharing new ideas, and language isn't being a barrier. And then the culture and the differences isn't being a barrier, because now you can understand each other, right? But then it's opening up ideas that they may never have been exposed to. But again, what ideas they have that, you know, here in North America, there's a lot of ideas and cultures and things that we can embrace and try and understand and learn
Right.
from, which are good, valuable things. So there is that understanding and opening of ideas. And I think that's where even like AI and technology is also common in that as well, right? And with AI language as well, right? And understanding and generating a language and things like that. So they kind of go hand in hand. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I really do.
And I feel like this is a topic we've talked about before in our industry, where AI plays a role, where we have, and this is valid, that there are languages around the globe that they are disappearing. Either small number of people speaks the language, and those individuals no longer with us, or their extended families have gone and learned other languages, and that initial language has disappeared, which is a shame. As a humanity, we speak many languages, and I saw stats the other day. There's 7,000 languages spoken around the world, which is great, and a testament to our to us as a humanity, and in many facets that we have, especially in the language side of things. AI can really help in preserving those languages, in capturing these languages, containing them within the neural network, and for people and for generations to access, to learn, and to preserve. Which you don't talk about it much, but the world doesn't run on key 4 or 5 languages. The world runs on all of its languages, and preserving all these languages and not limiting the communication to 2 or 3 top languages. It's very, very important for us as a humanity.
Can you think of it? I did classical civilization studies in my undergrad at U of T. Could you imagine we not having the Iliad or the Odyssey? That rich literature and understanding of the human experience, and how, look how that was preserved and passed on, and now we study it and we take it apart. We couldn't understand its original language and what that was. How much could we have missed? Socrates and Aristotle, and some of those philosophies and understanding.
And guess what? Most of these philosophers, they did not speak English at the time.
No, they didn't. Right? No, it was ancient Greek. So, and there's so much history, and that's part of it. We're, in a way, our present is going to be someone's history.
Correct.
Right?
And you absolutely hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah. So what are we going to do? What kind of history are we making?
Correct.
Right.
So, sorry, we're coming up on time here, and I don't want to.
I know we could talk forever.
And I feel the time just flew by, to be honest with you, talking to you, and I appreciate you
enjoy it
this morning. I could talk to you about the topic for an entire day, but we all have things to do, and we've got a bunch of schedules to meet. I really appreciate you being with me this morning. If there's any last few words you'd like to say before we finish the recording, I appreciate it.
Oh, not at all. Thank you so much for the opportunity and asking me. It's such a privilege and an honor to be on your podcast. And I love what you're doing. I really, truly do. And I think just the parting words is we need to just see each other and see each other for what we do and the talents we have, and value that, and how together, what breakthroughs and amazing history we can navigate for our generations to generations. And I think that's a key thing.
Again, Suki, thank you so much for being on my podcast this morning, and look forward to having further conversations with you, and hopefully bring you back to the podcast for another topic. Always pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.